Greatest ever Six Nations.
Question marks around the head coach, and I think really only a Grand Slam would have been the only antidote.
Have you met my friend BLBRE?
Yeah, Chesham was one of the standout players.
Scotland are still not answering questions away from home.
Wonderfully French in that they beat the record in Murrayfield for the most points scored in the championship in defeat. And then they were involved again in their own record being broken a week later when they conceded 46.
But they were playing for each other, and they were playing for the jersey, and that was, if you're an England fan, you just wanted some pride in the jersey.
Yeah, 100%.
Don't be sad it's over. Just be thrilled that it happened. We've reached the end of the Six Nations, and we're going to pick through it all because, wow, geez, how good. This is the Telegraph Rugby Podcast. My name is Alan Dymock. I'm a Commissioner for Sport here at the Tel, and I'm joined by Chief Rugby Correspondent Gavin Mairs, and with Rugby Reporter Charles Richardson. And guys, having been here, there and everywhere, and Gav, you might need a bit of coffee this morning as well, having hot-footed it back from Paris. How good?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I said in my match report, filed under intense pressure on the whistle on Saturday night. Greatest ever Six Nations. I think it's fair to say I've covered all 26, and there has been some memorable standout moments. We were talking earlier.
Some terrible hotels you've stayed in as well.
Some terrible hotels. Things that stand out. I mean, I still remember the history of covering 2000 when Italy joined and covering England and Rome that day, and just what a wonderful experience that was. England utterly dominant for those years, although didn't quite clinch the deal until 2003, a brilliant Grand Slam showdown victory against Ireland.
Parallels from 2000 to 2026 as well for Scotland. Lost to Italy in both.
We'll get to that.
We've seen Ronan O'Gara drop goal to go on a Grand Slam for Ireland's first time since 1948. I think 2015, when we look at comparisons to what we had at the weekend, the Super Saturday in 2015 was remarkable, because on that stage, England were also going for the title. Wales were going for the title. Ireland were going for the title. And it all came down to England needing to win. I think it was by margin of 26, and they got very, very close.
Was it a Jamie Heaslip try-saver on Stuart Hogg that basically sealed it?
And then we had the madness of France getting a penalty and then tapping it and running it in their own 22.
Yeah.
And everybody thinking...
Sorry, talking about the same France. Doesn't sound like
but
them.
I think, Dims, listen, I love this tournament, and I think what makes this one different is that we just saw every round had drama, every round had an upset. And we also saw real competition. So even if we say Wales were the worst team, they were a team that were getting better week by week. We've seen Italy... a lot of some of my colleagues over the years were, calling for them to be relegated out of the championship, and then we look at them now. Look at how they've developed. They are a serious team. They are a mid-table Six Nations team, and with potential to go higher. The worst teams are getting better, and we had absolute drama of the final two games. Ireland, massively and hugely impressive performance, did what they needed to do, put the pressure on France. France, and again, a colleague said to me that France have been brilliant but brittle. And we've seen now the last two games, for all their dazzling brilliance and ability to score tries that no other side can do, there's still a bit of the old France in there, Charles, is that fair?
100%. It's becoming the old France that went has now come back, and they look like it's the new old France, isn't it? Yeah, 100%.
And I mean, honestly, covering that match, 48-46, and it all coming down to the final kick. And can you ask for anything more?
Wonderfully French in that they beat the record in Murrayfield for the most points scored in the championship in defeat. And then they were involved again in their own record being broken a week later when they conceded 46 to England. So that was a record that they had that stood for a week, both involving France and them being mental.
Could you ask for anything more? I think Gav would have liked an extra at least 10 minutes to file his report,
Even
to be honest.
2 would have done.
I mean, for the sake of narrative, though, best ever?
Yeah, 100%. It came down to the last kick. It literally came down to the last kick. And at one point, I was in a Dublin airport hotel, and it was tasty in there by the time Ramos was putting that ball on the tee. There was a lot of nerves. There was a lot of people shouting. It was quite quiet at the start of the game in my hotel, because I just don't think that the Irish thought that England would do them a favour. I don't think that there was any. I don't think they thought that there was any chance of that happening. Then suddenly at half time, people started to trickle in. There were more people arriving, more people trickling in, to the point where at the end it was actually jumping. But then it was like a pin in the balloon when Ramos kicked that, because it was like, all right, okay, well, we'll all just go to bed then.
I can only imagine what it was like in Dublin, because I actually went out for dinner with my wife midway through that last match, having been in here all day, and there was 2 Irish ladies sitting at the table. It was quite a nice restaurant, 2 Irish ladies, and they had their phones out and they were watching the game, and it was weird hearing them cheer on England.
Yeah.
It just felt so strange.
So that's the beauty of it, because you want other supporters getting engaged with the drama of the final weekend, and no, it's special. There was I think somebody sent me a meme of some Ireland players trying to fix the chariot. I don't know if you saw that one. Come on, lads, we'll get this.
In the Aviva Stadium press box, obviously you know that it's the fans are very close to you, aren't they? You know, and when they're filing out, a lot of them, after Ireland had beaten Scotland in the first game on Saturday, there were chants of Swing Low Sweet Chariot as they were filing out. They were singing Swing Low Sweet Chariot in the Aviva Stadium as they were going out, and it nearly was a very sweet chariot, wasn't it?
Thank you for helping me out with the segue, Charles. We're going to get right into that right now and go through the rest of Super Saturday. Let's start with France 48, England 46, which even just saying that as a scoreline is absolutely bananas. This is a result where it's like, it's amazing at the end and the coaches won't care because, things can be decided on fine margins. If this was midway through the tournament, it would be an absolute coach killer, this scoreline. You would have, Sean Edwards would probably walk into the sea if this was mid-tournament, but obviously absolutely delighted to win the title. What was it like in real time being there?
It was one of the most remarkable games I've covered. I'd say it was a little bit odd.
It was a little bit odd. It was odd on the TV as well with those horses.
The horses, and just even given world events at the minute, to sort of talk about wars and things, I thought was just a bit weird. And
let's not get into the translation of the Marseillaise then.
Their marketing guys wanted to do a new kit and all that stuff, which made, I'm sure, hard for viewers and things. But listen, from the very start, we saw a very different England team, and as we can go into this in more detail. But the shackles were finally off, and they were playing. You look at the narrative of what happened in the first few minutes. The ease at which France could score tries just by a kick to BLBRA was alarming. But what was then so surprising and encouraging was that England actually responded. And that's a sort of moment where a broken team can just give up, given the atmosphere, given that there was nothing on the line for England. But they were playing for each other, and they were playing for the jersey. And that was, if you're an England fan, by this stage, by round 5, you just wanted some pride in the jersey.
Yeah, 100%.
And we got that. And then it unfolded. I was trying to capture it all in my match report. It was like there were so many moments in that game, Al, that normally even 1 or 2 would be massive talking points that would, we would devote reams of copy to.
Even just Maro Itoje trying to argue the spotting of the last kick of the game. It's
Brilliant.
like that in itself would have been a huge narrative anyway.
And that was just, honestly, one of tens.
Also very rugby that the deciding kick, the penalty for the deciding kick at midnight on Saturday night, no one really knew what it was for, why, or who conceded it. It required a sort of steward's inquiry to actually decipher what the penalty was for and who conceded it. I'm pretty sure it was Trevor Davison now for a high shot on Josh Brennan. What other sport would you have that where a title is decided on a mystery penalty, essentially? It's just, I find it baffling. But anyway.
But the thing is the one person in the entire building who was not baffled by it was Thomas Ramos.
No, and
if you see the clip of that kick from behind, he basically puts his arms out after as soon as he's hit it, he knows it's through and they've won the title.
I was a bit contrarian with that because as good as he is, and he is a fabulous rugby player, it had been such a mad match that I was actually sitting there thinking, I can see him missing this. Just because of how mad the game had been and how unpredictable the game had been, because he was never going to miss it, in inverted commas. He was never going to miss it. But then there was a part of me that was sort of like, this game has been so bizarre that I wouldn't be surprised now if he missed this, or even though it's on his right side. I wouldn't be surprised. But in the end, it couldn't have been more down the middle.
When to file the 1,000-word match report on the whistle, as soon as the penalty came, I started writing France it was.
Yeah.
Fair enough. You know.
Well, that's the thing.
So we will talk about big. So we're going to rattle through the Super Saturday, and then we'll talk bigger picture for England, because there's loads to get into with that. But in terms of performances, there was a lot of guys putting their hands up for. There'd been so much narrative about that England need to show desire, and that big game players need to put their hands up, and that it can't all be going on this one concentrated area. There's the players at certain key points need to do something. I think, is it fair to say Ollie Chesham definitely did that? Although where he scored his try is already also is a bit of a debate.
Yeah, Chesham was one of the standout players, and he recovered from a very poor game against Ireland, which cost him his place. So it was great to see him. He's sort of been identified as one of those guys that can be probably the captain after Maro Itoje. He's a very good.
Can I just say, I think there's an argument whereby he should do it sooner, maybe, and relieve Maro of that, and maybe he's not just a future potential captain.
So I think we need to see more consistency in his game first,
yeah, no, that's completely fair.
He was one of the outstanding players, but we can't say that across. There's been no consistency across the championship, and but it was just great to see what it meant to him. This is one of the things, you unpick the match a bit, but England during the course of the match, their tactics evolved. So at one stage they went, right, let's maul, let's try and take the legs out of the French team. It resulted in tries and changed the momentum of the match. And then you see him intercept that, run length of the pitch, and again, just run to the posts.
I think at the time everyone was it's just got England back in the game here, just get the ball down and score it.
It was an emphatic moment.
Yeah.
But I think there was a bit of a thread through the performance that England lacked street smartness. They were almost surprising themselves at how well they were doing and the fight that they were showing. But there was a number of moments where discipline again totally collapsed. And even in the last play, when Pollock rips the ball brilliantly and then throws a pass, and then
sublime to the ridiculous, wasn't it?
Murley tries to fly hack, and it just a serious team winning a match in Paris doesn't do those things.
I think that is as you said, that is the symptom of England arriving there having lost 3 matches on the bounce in quite dismal fashion, and maybe they did sort of surprise themselves. However, with the ball, like we've spoken about pride and reinstilling pride in the jersey and giving England fans something to shout about, with the ball they were a lot smarter, bar a couple of errors that we've just mentioned. Generally with the ball, because they'd been dumb for 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
No, I really agree with that. I think it was just more sort of game management at key moments,
100%.
Just for half time,
100%.
Just at full time, game one, after this incredible, winning the game about 6 times, and then you lose it right at the end, where the game was there. So that's the sort of thing where biggest takeaway was the spirit they showed, the enterprise they showed. So now it has to be the next step.
It's a minor point as well, but we've said it on this podcast before. Why do England not maul more? It's clearly a strength of theirs. It's just a massive strength of the coach. And it was a massive strength of the coach when he was at Leicester as well. Yeah. And then as soon as he's gone to international level, it's sort of disappeared from their game. I mean, there was an amazing one in the first few minutes against Scotland that you thought would really set the tone for the game. Then they never did it again. And actually their mauling is a real strength. And I just don't know why they don't do it more, especially when he's picking a team that he is and he keeps saying that he wants his team to play fast and run. You're then actually catching the opposition by surprise because they're expecting you to play quickly, and then bang, you're getting them in the tie, and you're actually more, which is exactly what would have happened against France, because there's no rhyme or reason why that England pack should be shunting back a French pack that's got Meafu and Guillard and these monster men in it. There's just no rhyme, and yet they still did it.
Just to come back to, and I'm going to stick with you on this one, Charles, is because Gav raised it and you said some sublime to the ridiculous. Henry Pollock has somehow ended up as the lightning rod again for this result. I mean, you sort of forget his level of experience, but he should have just fallen on that ball, shouldn't he? When he as soon as he got anywhere near contact instead of offloading.
Yeah, again, hindsight, a wonderful thing. I'm a little bit torn on that, to be honest, because
I must admit I do find it interesting
because I think it was on. It was on.
Yeah.
Like that, he gets his hand knocked, and maybe under the circumstances he shouldn't play that. But Steve Borthwick has spoken a lot about wanting his teams to play with ambition and be bold and brave and to play big. Well, that pass to Murley was on, and he might have gone there, and Murley might have gone, and that might have been the ball game. It's just he doesn't execute it. And Steve Borthwick has gone back a lot to that Calcutta Cup in 2024 of that George Furbank offload where he said that George was completely, where it goes to ground, and I think Scotland scored, and he was like, we want him to be doing that. It's just that no one was on the wavelength and it just all broke down. But that's the ambition that we want. And I feel like there's a part of that with Pollock, and you can't sort of say, you can't chuck Pollock over coals for doing that necessarily, but maybe in the context of the match, that wasn't necessarily the right call. Yeah. But also, if that pass goes to hand, then England might win. And England might win by more than a score, because Murley was gone. And it's very 50-50.
That's a sort of kind assessment, I think. In that moment,
yeah, maybe.
In that moment, the game's won. It's the game's over. Just look.
And he'd done the hard work.
Look for contact. Look for your support. Balls recycled, balls in touch.
I don't think England lost because of that moment. I think there were lots of other. They had their chances. They had opportunities. They had other opportunities to close out the game. They could have actually been further ahead, really, and it didn't. It's not all Henry Pollock's fault, let's say.
Right, so we'll have an English debrief after this because there's lots to get into the state of England's defence, England's discipline, but more importantly than any of that, what we make of where Steve Borthwick's position is right now, heading into, the next match is a massive one against the Springboks. We will get into all that. Just to look on the French. It's amazing. In the space of this Six Nations, Gav, we've gone from expecting this being talked up as a Grand Slam decider, to then being like, God, England needs anything to France look unbeatable, to France have coughed it up the last couple of weeks and look completely different as a team. They got the job done, but you must be driving yourself insane if you're a France fan watching that.
I don't think they probably felt like that on Saturday night, but I know the point that you're making. Go to the autumn, the defeat by South Africa, and then they've gone to Murrayfield and lost heavily. Should have lost on Saturday. If England had gone there with more confidence and more structure and more sure of their identity,
I think they certainly played a get out of jail free card, didn't they, France at the end? Certainly.
Yeah, there are still big question marks about France. However, they are, and this is maybe a point that's been missed in all of the drama of the Six Nations. And Charles, you know French rugby very well. I wonder, has Galtier sort of been using this a little bit with a view to next year? In some of his selections, has he been trying to build, like we've been talking so much about England's progress to the World Cup, Ireland's progress to the World Cup. France we've just made this national assumption that they are the finished article. And I think
there's an element of that, certainly. I think it's probably maybe a little bit of a kind assessment, but I think he will certainly be wary of what happened last time and how they won the Grand Slam in 2022, obliterated everybody, and then got knocked out of the World Cup in the quarterfinals. And this year's Six Nations would be the equivalent of that, and not wanting to peak too soon. I think there's certainly an element of that. You look at Aldrit not included, you look at Penaud not included. I still think there are fundamental issues to France that need resolving, and that there's a chance that this championship title papers over those cracks a little bit. Their scrum is weak. England got into them at the Maul, despite the fact they've got all these big blokes. Props are an issue, and also defensively, they are a little bit all over the shop. But for them, it almost doesn't matter so much, because it's a case of you can score as many points as you like, and we'll just score more. That's almost the attitude. That's almost what it's become. And to be fair, you'd have to say on the evidence of Saturday that it's an attitude that is sort of working, because England went to Paris and scored 46 points and lost.
Have you met my friend BLBRE?
Well, precisely, and his 4 tries, and and a lot, but he's rightly got plaudits for those, but a few of them were walk-ins. Yeah. Not that I'd have been walking them in, but
Atazogbe is one of the players that really impressed me, and he's a guy that no one was talking about, probably apart from you, before this championship.
Yeah,
but that was a big call to bring him in, and as you talk about Penaud, Aldrit, Fiku, in some ways, that's just a take I'm looking, was a little bit of him going, I know what these guys can do, rather than they are axed. And it's like, let's see what the younger talent, and you've seen a few of those guys really step up.
100%. Like their depth is scary. It's just about whether now their first team, their starting 15, can go and do it, essentially.
Yeah.
You know, their depth is incredible. Like their centre depth is unbelievable.
And I think on that respect, they've probably, people will look back maybe now and say they should have won a Grand Slam by now.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an argument
for this
that
generation of players and talent and depth. We started this tournament saying that England needed to win the Six Nations to sort of underscore their progress. I think France probably needed to win the Grand Slam to really catch attention of South Africa and the Southern Hemisphere side, to say France are going into World Cup year at least as serious contenders.
100%. And there are public grumbles about Galtier, and I think that there still are, even though they've won the title on Saturday night, especially because they won the title on Saturday night in a game that they were miles favourites for with the last kick of the game. And as much joy as there is in France and around French rugby at the minute, there are question marks around the head coach. And I think really only a Grand Slam would have been the only antidote to that, really, for him. And I still think those question marks will remain, and deservedly so. Like we've said, they are a fabulous side. You know, they are the darlings of the neutral. Really, rugby needs them and the way that they play to be successful, because it's so entertaining and it's so like enrapturing. However, they are fallible, and they look more fallible now than they did in the build up to the 2023 World Cup, and they got knocked out in the quarterfinals there. So maybe they are biding their time, as you say, Gav. We'll just have to wait and see.
I'm going to shift focus slightly, actually, and I'm going to stick with you here, Charles, because tell you who didn't look fallible at the weekend was Ireland.
No,
that was best performance of the Six Nations for them.
Yeah, I would say so, definitely. I mean, in the end, it was comfortable. They kept first 20 minutes. I was sitting there thinking this could be game of the championship. Obviously, I wasn't know what was coming in Paris that night, but I was thinking this is game of the championship. Got written all over it here. Scotland have turned up, like they got stung early by Ireland, but then responded with an unbelievable phase try where they went, I think, 19 phases, basically swept virtually half the length of the pitch, and they were fabulous. But then errors started creeping in. Ireland pressured them so well. The Irish back row played really well. In fact, the whole of the Irish pack played really well. Ty Byrne was awesome. I thought Josh van der Fleer had his best game of the championship as well. And this is a man who was dropped after that loss in Paris and then came back in, and I thought he was class. Doris obviously is just a great rugby player, and they actually overwhelmed them physically. Scotland got dominated. They were nowhere near at the level that they were at against France. Ireland kept them at arm's length. Yeah, there was always sort of a score in it until the 65th minute, but it was always Ireland going 2 scores ahead, Scotland pulling one back, Ireland going 2 scores ahead, Scotland pulling one back. Then at the 65th minute, just the floodgates opened and Ireland ran away with it. And in the end, the scoreline, I think was it 22 points, the final score?
Yeah, so it was Ireland 43, Scotland 21. And
it was completely justified. In no way flattered Ireland. I thought in the end, they would never have said this after the game, of course. I thought it was a pretty comfortable win. And I think that Scotland, they've received a lot of credit for the way that they played in that first hour. But I don't think they deserve too much credit for that final score, because I think they've lost by 22 points in a Six Nations match, and it was deserved.
And with silverware on the line.
Correct.
Albeit it's Triple Crown, and we've written about who talks about Triple until the Triple Crown is there for the takeout.
But it might not have been just the Triple Crown for Scotland. That's the thing, especially with what happened in Paris, and especially if Ramos misses that final kick, and then that's like, imagine if Ramos had missed that final kick and Scotland have missed that opportunity in Dublin. Admittedly, it was an opportunity that Ireland took and would have completely deserved. But going into Super Saturday, Scotland, out of Ireland and Scotland in a way were, even though they'd never won at the Aviva Stadium, Scotland were the more likely championship winners because they had more points than Ireland. And so France had to do more to leapfrog Scotland had they won in Dublin. So that would have been a massive missed opportunity for them. But in the end, it was all completely irrelevant.
So what's the chat around Ireland now? Because there's a feeling, I mean, the team got a rocket from Andy Farrell after that humbling against France. Absolutely rampant against England, and then much more of a complete performance, really, in the end against Scotland, where you'd argue like things look like they're in a pretty good place now, which is completely different from what we were saying after one round. Again, that talks to the brilliance of the Six Nations and how different it can be week to week.
Yeah.
But if you're Andy Farrell, where do you sit now looking at this Ireland project?
Been a very, very positive Six Nations. I think, as you say, they had a very difficult autumn. Farrell was coming back from Lions, the huge commitment of coaching the Lions, as a lot of his players had been in that test side. There was sort of, are they too old? Is there a fatigue element here? Has Farrell been too loyal? Like if you look back on what he was saying in the autumn, it was like we will naturally be transition, and there will always be injuries. And one of the things, like Dim's your front row legend, Tom O'Toole. Tom O'Toole is a tight head prop.
Yeah,
he is at least the fifth choice loose head prop in Ireland, and he, if you want to, we can talk about Stuart McCluskey, we can talk about Robert Balakoon, we can talk about Tommy O'Brien. You look at sort of depth, what's happened, Tom O'Toole. And it's funny, when Ireland won the Grand Slam in 23, I can remember doing a sort of Monday follow for the Telegraph, and we ended up writing about Tom O'Toole because he'd come on and had this like really good cameo.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
And it was like, this is why at that point it's like, this is why Ireland might go on to win the World Cup, which obviously they didn't. But he's been around the camp.
Yeah,
but and a really effective player. But Andy Farrell's asked him to transition mid-tournament to loose head prop, and I was listening on the way into the office this morning. I was listening to some of the post-match interviews given, and O'Toole goes into sort of quite nice detail about having a one-on-one with Farrell and how he speaks to him about what is expected of him and how motivated he was from that meeting. It's one of those things they've now, and it's now given to talk to whether Andrew Porter's now going to switch back to tight head prop.
Really?
Is the other interesting thing, because that's where he started.
Yeah.
Going into this tournament, Ireland, the narrative was about Ireland's scrum crisis, the prop crisis. Their scrum didn't move.
It was really good on Saturday, and actually O'Toole had a great game. Just though, on a similar theme, Gav, I think if England hold on in Paris, then we're sitting here with Stuart McCluskey as player of the championship.
Yeah.
And who'd have had that?
I know.
Who'd have had money on that?
And I still think he is.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I think there's obviously this unwritten rule whereby it has to come from the winning side. I would completely agree. Yeah. Certainly, the surprise of John, without a shadow of a doubt. Not that I didn't rate him, but I didn't think he could do it at that level as consistently and as excellently as he has.
Yeah, and again, listening to those post-match interviews, Farrell said about McCluskey 5 games in a row. So it was like, can he back up performance after performance? And you could say Saturday was his best. That
he outplayed Tuipulotu, so I would say that.
An all-round package of defence. His defence is incredible. His work rate, we saw with the Marcus Smith run down at Twickenham. But as a baller,
his pass for the Balakoon try was the pass of the championship.
If Finn Russell had done that, we would be
or
still
Dupont.
talking about
Exactly, 100%.
So for a big man who, when he
good
first
answer for a big man. Is that where we're going?
When he first came in the scene,
off his left as well.
All his nicknames from sort of. I think it was Bangor Bulldozer was the first one. He's been called the Irish fridge in France, I think. Is that right?
I don't know. What, like Tuisova?
Yeah. But anyway, he's a guy who's come through, and Balakoon and O'Brien, suddenly Ireland have pace and finish on the wings, which again, when we were looking post James Lowe, Hansen, are they winding down? Are they where can Ireland change their game plan, how they score tries? I think overall, Ireland have obviously would have loved to have won the title. They won the Triple Crown in my day, Triple Crown really did mean something. Yeah. And particularly if you're an Ireland rugby supporter as a boy,
Scotland
you were never going to beat France.
I'd take a Triple Crown. I'll bite your hand off for a single crown, to be honest.
But you look at that and think that they've won 4 out of 5 again. I think it's 5 years in a row. They've won at least 4 out of 5. Yeah. That is incredible. performance. We look back at that, people saying about there was too many Irish players in the Lions. There's a reason for that. They've been the absolute most consistent team.
100%.
I've got another one from McCloskey. He reminds me of that tool chest that comes down the stairs in Home Alone 2 that flattens the burglars. He's a runaway tool chest. That's what he is. But actually, that was indicative of that match on Saturday. Is that Ireland had front football consistently, but incredibly clean ball. They just bossed the breakdown. It was like they could decide what they wanted to do. And you can talk an awful lot about Ireland's defence, but actually because of how they operated on the other side of the breakdown as well, is that Scotland had to power through so many phases to try and break Ireland down. And that was the difference, is Ireland could slice through and Scotland had to and they did it incredibly well.
They actually did it really well twice on two, or maybe three of their tries. I'm just reckoning, certainly two, maybe three of their tries were just incredibly patient, well-constructed tries where you're sitting there going, God, these guys can really play, but they just didn't do it often enough.
And Charles, I know you're saying about Ireland were comfortable winners. I actually find the match, we were watching it in Paris, I found it utterly compelling. I thought
100%.
I thought Scotland gave a really good go. It wasn't as if they didn't fire enough shots.
No.
I think they were probably, when it came to it, as it's been 12 in a row now or something, the Irish pack just tend to dominate the collisions enough to stop Scotland's all-court game. But the manner they're scoring their first try, that was a proper, and 60 minutes was like, if Scotland score again, then we are into...
That was the turning point.
And Ireland, and it didn't matter, and they did push on. So you look at the time, you look at the narrative. It was a comfortable win, and it was a comfortable win in the end. But I actually find that a higher quality of test than the France-England game, which was much more of a sort of basketball type thing. Of there were people were the two.
It was a different kind of tension.
Two teams were scoring tries too easily, whereas I think in Ireland and Scotland you really had to earn your tries with excellence.
I would agree with that,
work rate.
100%. I just think that in Paris, I think the loser played better than in Dublin. I think Scotland gave it a good go for 60 minutes, 65 minutes, but then they fell off for the last 15, whereas at least, to be fair to England, they played for the full well into the 80 minutes. They lost in the last kick of the game. And
just on Scotland, because you've seen them a couple of times now. You were bragging on Saturday about how the weather was following you everywhere you went.
So I went to Edinburgh for France Scotland, and it was not a cloud in the sky. I landed in Dublin on Saturday morning for
sun splitting the trees.
Ireland, Scotland, and there's not a cloud in the sky. And I'm thinking, is this the Six Nations? Is this my luck? Really? This is not my luck when I travel. The last time I travelled to Dublin with work, we had 2 aborted landings and people were screaming on the plane. So I was just sitting there going, what's going on?
How do we assess Scotland now? Because and listen, if you write it down and what the results are, and it's like, oh my goodness, they've absolutely blown away England and they've absolutely blown away France. Home games. And this is the thing, is Scotland are still not answering questions away from home, which is something that we discussed right at the start of the tournament. Now, they constructed some really nice stuff. There's been some incredible, like Kyle Steyn, what a tournament he's had.
Matt Fagerson as well, I think, has been awesome. Jack Dempsey, some of the back rowers been class.
Yeah, so how do you assess them? Because there was a lot of release of pressure on Gregor Townsend. Players came out, swinging for him, and they went to Dublin genuinely with incredible opportunity in front of them. First time we can say, really, that they ended it was like, this is on here, and it didn't quite come off. So in the cold light of day, after a couple of days, how do you assess them?
Well, it's the $1 million question, really, and it's the question that now Gregor Townsend and his coaches have to go away and try and answer, is how can we match the mentality and the attitude of what we deliver at Murrayfield outside of Murrayfield, because there's never been a question that they are able to do it on that pitch in Edinburgh. They ran the All Blacks really close last autumn on that pitch. Admittedly, they had a bit of a capitulation against Argentina, but for the first half, they were streets ahead, beat England there, beat France there when they were not favourites to do so. And then away from home, the Rome game was maybe a little bit of an anomaly, but then away from home, they've, even in Cardiff, they came back and won that game, but there is an alternate reality where Wales win that game, I think. And I think maybe this upcoming Nations Championship, where they're going to have to fly everywhere and play lots of different sides away from home, might be a good litmus test for them. And certainly they've got a good run up into that to prepare. And he can go away, Gregor, and say, okay, this is what's been working at Murrayfield. This is why we're good at Murrayfield. How do we bottle that, and how do we take it with us around the world so that we can replicate what we produce at home away from home? Because there's no doubt that is their Achilles heel at the minute. I mean, it's just there. It's bare facts in the table. Okay, they won one game away, but as we've just said, they could quite easily have lost that match away from home, and then the other two they did lose. In fact, one of them, as we've just said, pretty comfortable. Like they did not come close to winning that game. They lost by 22 points.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're talking at the end of the Six Nations, and Scotland finished third again. They lost in Dublin again. But you got to say through the tournament, we were talking about the overall entertainment factor of this tournament. And I must say, hand up as well, speaking to a lot of fans, there feels like there's been a real release of pressure in Scotland, and that people are like, right, build on this. You've got time to build on this and see where it goes. Let's crack on now. But with that, there were some real highlights from them this
really good, Dims. And as you know, I was sort of kept saying it was your year, and Glasgow, like the former
Glasgow. Just to see me squirm, I think.
Kiss of death. Gavin Mairs, kiss of death.
Another kiss of death. But listen, I think with Scotland, like there has to be an element of realism of it's building a team from two teams. And like, Dims, if I was thinking today coming into the office, if you're going to say, what was your player of the tournament, surprise of the tournament? There's a strong argument to say Scotland's victory over England was actually the surprise of the tournament. If we go back to that moment where England have put 50 points on Wales, Italy have beaten Scotland, there was no expectation. And Gregor Townsend was under, he was under more pressure than Steve Borthwick was, I would say, going into the France game at that moment. And look at the performance that they delivered. I just have a soft spot for how they try and play the game, and the way the likes of Sione came out so strongly in backing his coach and the manner of which they play. There's always going to be a slight issue with Scotland in terms of heft in the front five and things. But the likes of Dempsey, the back row, Finn Russell is... I think Ireland did a good job on Finn Russell, but he is at the peak of his powers at the minute. And you have a playmaker like that. As Charles says, Scotland's challenge is consistency, and when it really matters. Now they have, to be fair, they have won in London more than most. It's the other away game that they've excelled in. But like if we're thinking third place is a really good finish behind. If we're talking about the greatest ever Six Nations, to finish third is a pretty good result. And if they're looking ahead to the World Cup, it's going to be, right, okay, how can we manage to deliver that performance that we've seen against France and England when it really matters? Because the last two World Cups, they've really fallen on their face when the pressure's on. And
Gregor Townsend said something really interesting after the game on Saturday, and he said that we might not replicate that French performance ever again, is what he said, which I know what he means, in that I think he was basically saying that we were essentially perfect. I think they certainly have to believe that they can, and that has to be the ambition and the aim. And
Definitely.
I think for him, I think he has to think big, and I think he has to get his players to think big, and I think they have to think that that's not the ceiling. Beating France by 10 points, that needs to be the start. It needs to start there and build from there.
Can I jump in on belief? Because I think one of the standards as well, and it's a match we're just going to end up speaking a lot less about because of the nature of what the other two games were like. But Wales 31, Italy 17. In terms of belief, there's just a significant blow for Wales, and they just looked like they were on it from minute one. Yeah. Like, for all of the, it's basically... all of Welsh rugby must have felt like a pedal bin where you've just opened it up and everyone's just shoveling all this stuff in. To get away from that and to have this sort of positive vibe the weekend must feel such a relief.
Honestly, Dims, and again, we go back to why has this been the greatest championship? You've got the team with utter disarray in domestic Welsh rugby and haven't won a Six Nations game for 3 years, and they manage to improve slowly but surely to the point where you looked at the work rate. Are they playing for their coach? What's Steve Tandy? The very fundamentals of, I remember our predictions at the start of the championship. This would be the sort of, whatever, if there'd be nothing else, they would be, they would improve their defence, their work rate, and having Reece Summit back gives them an X factor
Yeah.
to build around, or at least give the opposition.
He's almost as fast as Rhys Carey.
Yeah. Lewis Reese Carey. Yeah, I mean, I think, and also they found some other good backs who are really stepping. I mean, Ben Mee we know about anyway, but Eddie James has been really good. Leicester fans certainly will be licking their lips at the way that Aaron Wainwright played on Saturday, and sort of the physicality that he brought, and matched by Dowie Lake. I think Daffy Jenkins has been playing really well. I've always really rated him, and I think he's been playing really well for Wales. I actually, not meaning to be sort of Mary, quite contrary, I was really disappointed by Italy, I must say. They barely got out of second or third gear. Their attack faltered. Admittedly, I don't want to take anything away from Wales because they were excellent and they fought so hard and they clearly wanted it and they clearly targeted this match. And a lot of the Italian mistakes will have come from Welsh pressure. But I thought after the England win, it felt a bit like a step forward and 2 steps back for Italy, then going to Wales and barely really firing. There was a point in the second half where you thought, okay, Italy could come back here because they can score tries quickly. Wales had just had a man sin bin from that collapsed maul, and it just completely petered out into a nothing sort of rearguard, and I was quite disappointed by them, actually.
Overall, for Italy, again, it feels like I'm doing an awful lot at the moment of going, yeah, but as well as that, here's this amazing thing. But the thing is, you can't avoid that with Italy.
It's been such a topsy-turvy tournament for nearly every side, hasn't it? It's been for almost every
I mean, when
team.
you write it down, Italy beat Scotland, who beat England.
Yeah, I filed this. I'll find it, and we will come back to that. But
everyone's beat them. Basically, Wales are the champions.
Yeah, basically Wales are the champions. The champions are France, and at Murrayfield they were terrible. Italy were not good in Cardiff and yet beat England. England have not been bad lots, but then were really good on Saturday night against France. Ireland were not very good on the opening night, and Andy Farrell admitted as much, and then got much better and better and better. Scotland were not good on the opening day, were not good on the last day, and were really good in between. And we've just had this real sort of mountainous, tumultuous championship where the sort of narrative of every team has gone up, down, up, down, up, down. Admittedly, for England, it's been more sort of down, 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 then massively up at the end, even in defeat. So it has been a really unpredictable, odd championship, but that should take nothing away from it because the entertainment value has been 10 out of 10.
And Italy, whatever we say about how they ended it, they made history, and it's amazing for them.
You could actually argue on that, on Charles's point, they've probably been the most consistent through. They haven't had the huge big stuff. They didn't actually play that well against England, but they did enough to win the game. They finished probably with their worst performance, but they've been a pretty consistent side, and that's a real step forward for them because it's hard. And we'll get onto this about the condensed nature of the Six Nations. It's a hard thing to back up performance after performance.
So just very quickly, that stat, which was actually unearthed by colleague Daniel Schofield, is Wales beat Italy, who beat Scotland, who beat France, who beat Ireland, who beat England, who beat Wales.
My head is...
You start with Wales and you end with Wales.
My head is spinning, right? But that was the Six Nations it was exceptional. Now, I think it's only fitting that we drill down into where England stand with all this. I'm going to come to you first on this, Charles, is that England end on a high, but if we just look purely at the numbers, they've lost 4 matches in a Six Nations.
For the first time ever?
For the first time ever. And it seems like Steve Borthwick will be entrusted to go to the World Cup now. Ollie Brown has written today that England should be moving heaven and earth to try and get Andy Farrell after that fact. Where do you think we stand now with Steve Borthwick?
I think Saturday night, with public opinion, reignited his premiership, but I think there are still doubts among the general public. I don't think it's not like all is forgiven from Saturday night, but I think there is enough now of a seed of doubt among a public who were becoming increasingly disillusioned with England. I think there's now a seed of doubt they've thrown a spanner in the works, that performance. I mean, was it the best performance under Steve Borthwick for England in defeat? I was thinking about this on the way in, have all of England's best performance under Steve Borthwick come in defeat? I think there's an argument for that. And I think now the challenge for him and the coaches, a bit like with Gregor and with Scotland, the challenge for him and the rest of the coaches is, how do we get this group of players to play like that when they haven't been written off, when they are favourites or close to being favourites? Why does it take that to get something, for them to pull something out of the fire? Because I think the other candidate for the best performance under Steve Borthwick, actually in a winning cause, is that Ireland game in 2024, the Ireland game, which had come on the back of opening losses. They, when they'd been written off, when no one expected them to win. They had that week in York, no one expected them to win, then they pull that out the fire. It seems like this team thrives off being written off or being underdogs, and in terms of a mentality and a sports psychology perspective, they need to be going away now and thinking, why is that, and what do we do to make this team comfortable with being expected to win? And that's basically it now for England, because we've seen that they can do it. We've seen that the players can do it. We've seen that they can attack well. Okay, there were question marks over the defence, but you're playing the best attacking side in the world, maybe ever, who knows? And so you're going to ship some points. They now need to figure out a way whereby they're going, okay, they will be underdogs in South Africa. Of course they will be. Most teams are. After that, there'll be games where they are probably favourites. They need to win.
So with that bearing in mind, Gav, it's England we're talking about here. The benchmark should be right up here. The review of all this for Steve Borthwick is going to be pretty stinging. Has to be.
I don't think he is safe to the World Cup.
Okay.
You from your statement there, the next 3 games are critical.
Okay.
If you look at the RFU statement was unprecedented statement made not mid-tournament.
Well, it was sort of, yeah.
Mid-tournament to offer support, but critically it was conditional support. They could easily have said, Steve is our man to the World Cup, to just take the heat out. They didn't say that. There's going to be a review which is starting this week, and I think if the defeat had been really bad on Saturday, I think we may not have even got to July. So it's serious. There is.
He's bought time, hasn't he?
I think I opened it up in my report on Saturday to go the manner of the defeat, and it was a defeat, and we should never get away from that.
No.
Like, England should have been going to Paris to win the Grand Slam.
And ironically, the game did still have that sort of feel to it, despite the fact that England were playing for nothing, didn't it?
And looking back over the 2 years, where people are saying, why has this gone wrong? And you look back and say, 2024 was kind of a year of narrow misses. 25 was small defeat. Yeah, they were getting things over the line. This was the year, and we started off. Remember the first pod? They need to win away from home to be a serious team. And really, I thought this year is when they needed to win the Six Nations. Maybe not the Grand Slam, but England need to win a Six Nations. It's 2020 is the last time. If you're 3 years into a World Cup programme with all the resources, we are year 2 into the new professional game agreement, which has given the England coaching team unprecedented access and control. In my view, they should have gone further, but they didn't. But it's still more than any other head coaches had. I don't think you can underplay what a setback this has been on that front, and finishing with 4 defeats is very damaging. It really is.
For most fans, it's unforgivable.
We can't get away from that. And I can agree with Charles in that it's bought time, and I have a lot of time for Steve Borthwick, and he's a hard-working guy. He really cares more than most about English rugby as a whole and this team. The questions are being asked about, has it been too data-driven? Is there an emotional intelligence there? If you look at the reactions that Farrell got, that Townsend got, that Tandy has got, like every other team, ironically apart from France, who have sort of tailed off a little bit themselves, but that's Galtier's that kind of coach, isn't he?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's not try and work them out.
So that's the thing. And something obviously happened last week. The players, something happened that, we were away in Verona. They've had 3 really poor performances, and we were the sort of coverage that we were giving is like, if nothing else, play for the jersey. This thing, it's about character, not about, are they kicking too much, or are they doing... We just didn't see work rate from the team. Even in the victory over Wales, Jamie George has talked about looking at, with horror at the GPS numbers that were coming through. They weren't working against Wales. So if you're not working hard enough, and you're not... And maybe that suggests buy-in from, do they really believe in how they're playing? All those, there's a lot of things to unpick, and that will be unpicked in the review. And again, there's history to this, Dims, because 4 years ago, England were in exactly the same position with Eddie Jones. Bill Sweeney had to make the decision at the end of the Six Nations. Did they let him go? They gave him the tour to Australia. There was an uptick in performance. That gave him the autumn. By the end of the autumn, he was gone. And Steve Borthwick was then had to be parachuted in. So I think the RFU will not want to repeat that scenario. Yeah. If they're going to make a change, I believe they'll make it after July if they feel that's the time, because you want to give a new coach an autumn campaign, a Six Nation and the World Cup training camp to get ready. Yeah. And so they're going to have to make a call. And I think if England can go to Johannesburg, build on this performance, and I mean, they should be going to looking to win that. They have, this a year out from the World Cup, they should be looking to win that. And
I think if they win that, he's safe.
Absolutely. You beat South Africa, and if there's feedback from the review, maybe the things are tweaked and how the coaching setup is, whether there's a tweaking to the senior leadership group, someone like Chesham maybe needs to be given more of a voice, things like that. But it's.
And do you think coaching wise, it's a bit too many cooks?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask. Coaching tickets, one thing I've written down here, and I'm glad you raised it, Gav, because I'd like you to expand on that thought, actually, Charles, because one of the things that we get the most comments about, or the most questions about, genuinely, is what's Richard Wigglesworth's role? Who's doing what? What are the responsibilities with these assistant coaches? Are they doing enough? The coaching ticket feels like it's like a little chop here, a little change there every year. You said too many cooks. What do you think the way forward should be for England?
Well, obviously that'll be a massive part of the review, but they have 4 coaches there who are defence specialists. They might not be working in that area now, but you look at Richard Wigglesworth, who is currently the leading defence coach. You then have Byron McGuigan, who is job sharing with Sale in England, who is the sort of edge defence coach, the wide defence coach, the backs defence coach. You then have Joel Abd, who arrived as a defence coach and is no longer the defence coach, but is in charge of breakdown, contact area, a bit of forward stuff, that sort of thing. You then have Kevin Sinfield, who also arrived as a defence coach, but is now skills and working with kickers. And so you've got Lee Blackett obviously working the attack, Tom Harrison working the scrum, who, by the way, deserves massive plaudits because England's scrum has been probably the best in the championship, and I don't think anyone would have been sitting here saying that 12 months ago. Then there's obviously Phil Morrow, who's in charge of the sort of strength and conditioning, but more than that. And then beneath him, there's Dan Tobin, who is the sort of Aled Walters strength and conditioning guy. And it's a lot of people who all have their own strengths. Is it too many people? I think would be the question. I don't know. We're not on the coaching staff. We're not in camp, so we cannot tell you who's doing what in terms of who's doing the heavy lifting there. But it just feels like a lot of people, doesn't it?
Charles, when you contrast that to the Argentina tour that you were on, where it was a much more nimble group, and I think Lee Blackett came in and McGuigan came in, and I think there's probably it seemed anyway, and you have to take context of the quality of the performances, but it seemed that England were changing how they were playing, and there was an input. It's difficult in a test week for everyone. I mean, every assistant coach wants time for their department. I think if you're going to have that many people, the only way it works is if no one works in silos, if people buy in, so defence and attack, they're all working together for the same thing. It's not like I want an hour in defence here because our defence isn't very good, and then you get coaches competing against each other for defence was okay. That it all has to be integrated for the common purpose of.
Just very, very quickly before we move on and go through the winners and losers and your questions, and thank you very much for saying them in. Gav, just last thing on England. Is there anything you'd like to say to put a bow on England's Six Nations, or what's next for them?
Oh, it's impossible to put a bow on. I mean, I think, I think ultimately, if you look at the last 2 games, I think we saw probably the midfield that Steve Borthwick wanted to pick in Atkinson and Freeman, and I think we saw with Finn Smith there was more potency, cohesion about their attacking game, and I think it was great to see someone like Chesham seize the moment when it was a pretty desperate situation that England found themselves in. But, otherwise, I think scrum's been good. Line out has been good, but I would agree with Charles. I'd love to see them use their mauling game more.
The line out looks a damn sight better when they had basically 3 locks.
Well, that's and I think maybe
I think that might be the end of the 3 open sides.
Maybe it's a negative positive, but I think maybe they've found out what not to do in this tournament. Like the 3-7 thing didn't work.
Yeah,
you need Chesham. You need a Coles or a Chesham or someone. And England will look, say, when George Martin's back and Feo Boso's back and Furbank's fit, things could be improved quite quickly, but we're not there yet.
Let's talk about the winners and losers. It's amazing because this has been an incredible tournament. There's been loads and loads of highs. I don't think you can avoid some of the weirder moments of this Six Nations. We've had mid-game adverts, for example. That has been a thing and we've spoken about those. Yeah, Gav, I very much know Gav's
no way to talk about Dims.
I very much know how Gav feels about Thursday night matches, for example.
Yeah.
Is there anything
Never
else,
again.
Yeah. Is there anything else, just very quickly, that sort of stood out for you as either been incredible that we might have forgotten?
Well,
about?
just to follow up the Thursday night, the difference on the Saturday being in Paris for that game to the Thursday, dear.
Even if it is 10 past 9 p.m.
Yeah, there should have been horses on the Thursday, shouldn't there? That was what Thursday was missing.
Yeah.
Horses.
Winners, losers, anything that sticks out for you?
I think Galtier meltdown about the changing rooms. Massive loser. Massive loser. Like, I still don't think enough was made of that. It was just incredibly odd. You're on for a Grand Slam. You're going away. Everyone thinks it's a potential banana skin. You're the darlings of the rugby world. You're the darlings of the neutral. You're playing beautiful rugby. Everyone's completely behind you. And then at your team announcement, you sort of get drawn into a petty argument about the size of the away changing room at Murrayfield. Incredibly weird.
I'd completely forgotten about that. Same as I'd forgotten about that the referee went down mid-game in England-Ireland. I completely forgot about that.
That was a mad half. That first half was incredibly weird. That was one of the strangest halves of rugby at Twickenham I've ever seen because England were in complete disarray. Ireland were sort of running the show and scoring at will. The referee went off injured. There were first half hookings, an incredibly strange half of rugby.
French kit for that last game, where do we stand for that? Because before the match, everyone was like, this is beautiful, chef's kiss, this is beautiful. And then during the game, we're like, wait, how has this happened?
Like, it's just.
What was it like seeing it from the tribune?
Marketing. It was as it was. I mean, it's pale powder blue and white. You can't see the numbers. Right. So the numbers were white on a powder blue shirt.
Yeah, that is very strange.
Adidas made a big thing about it, and some of the guys made a big thing about it, and it looks lovely, I'm sure, as a casual thing, but it's just a bit of marketing.
The issue with it, surely, is who on earth has green-lit those two kit colours playing together and said it's not a clash, because apparently World Rugby had said it was fine. Now, I have friends who are casual rugby fans who are probably more football fans than rugby fans, who when Adidas released and announced this kit and unveiled this kit, text me saying that is one of the nicest shirts in the history of sport. And so that's sort of fine and well done, France, hip hip hooray for France, and fine for them to wear it. But then England surely have to wear their away kit to avoid the clash. Like, just the Six Nations have got rid of Wales and Ireland playing in red and green because of colourblind, to avoid a colourblind clash. Well, the poor people who are colourblind on Saturday night wouldn't have had a clue, because people who aren't colourblind didn't really have much of a clue either.
What did we make of the shortened schedule for the Six Nations this year?
Loved it.
Yeah, good. I think it does ask a lot of the players, more of the players, and I think we probably saw more rotation than we would have seen normally. But as a flow for the tournament, it just meant that we're in that era of people just want to see the action, and if you have two breaks, you have to sort of, what was the last thing happened again? This is just like it's on.
I don't think it's a coincidence that this championship has been so good when they got rid of one of the fallow weeks. I always thought that those two fallow weeks were the game. Exactly. I always thought that, even before I was a rugby journalist, I used to think that those two fallow weeks with that one game in the middle just sat momentum from the championship, I thought. And it had to it did come back. Like, it did come back, but it had to work to come back for those last 2 weekends.
And 2 points on that. It's really good preparation for World Cup.
Yeah.
And B, you go back to the argument, is it harder to win the Six Nations than the World Cup? There is no easy game in. I think when you get to the end of the World Cup, it's harder, but to still be in the tournament by round 5 is pretty taxing.
A winner for me is the discovery of an American TikToker, if we know what TikTok is. An American TikToker discovering rugby for the first time and commenting on it. Yeah, no, obviously. Anyway, shall we move on to more serious matters?
Can I go back to like Stuart McCluskey or something?
Well,
yeah.
Actually, so one of the questions.
France need to pick Guillard and Meafu in the second row together. Okay.
So one of the questions that we're always getting asked this, but and you touched on McCloskey, but just anyone else put their hand up for player of the tournament for you, or is he the standout? You think?
Well, no, I think we have spoken about him before. The other thing that we didn't mention is that he's 33, and people say, "Oh, where's he been?" He
an unenviable injury record.
Yeah, and you look at the guys who are ahead of him, but I love the fact that he never gave up on his dream of playing for Ireland, and he was behind, Henshaw, Ringrose, Aki. There were parts of his game where he had to work on, and maybe it came a bit easy for him because of his size and bulk. But there's a guy who's gone to every camp, gone home, come back, gone home, come back, finally got his chance, and you see he's a complete player at 33, and just celebrate that. Don't make a thing about his age. Just say, there's a guy loving his rugby, he's worked really hard, and he does so many things and is so impactful.
Equally, I'm all aboard the McCloskey train, but I tweeted at half-time on Saturday during the England-France match in Paris. Half-time, I tweeted saying, Ollie Chesham has been the best player on the pitch by a stretch now. And then I was like, oh no, wait. So then I did a quick reply to myself, brackets, if we just take Louis BRA as red. And I think that he obviously has to be in the chat for player of the championship as well. That's 2 championships in a row where he's scored in every game. I obviously scored 4 tries on Saturday night in France's win. I think he's got now 27 caps and 29 test tries. He's already got as many championship tries as Rory Underwood. Like already, he's 22 years old, and I think he only needs to score 8 more tries in the Six Nations to be the top try scorer in the championship ever, including 5 Nations. And I think it's just easy to sometimes forget just because of how dominant he's been so quickly and how it's just it's become so normal and so routine now for him to be scoring tries at this rate. But he's pretty phenomenal, and he's a phenomenal talent. And okay, yes, some of those tries were walk-ins, but they're only walk-ins maybe because it's him and he makes it look easy.
Okay. Just because we're running out of time, I'm going to combine a couple of questions that we got in. And Taylor's asked, where does Guy Pepper sit after this championship? And Daniel has asked, based on this competition, what would be the headline 15 selections to face the Springboks in July? I suppose we can kind of combine those. Would you pick Guy Pepper to play against the Springboks, or would there be any other big changes that you'd make from this group for England?
Well, if George Martin's fit, it changes
That's a big
things.
question, yeah.
So because he will definitely play in the second row, and that allows him to play Chesham definitely
at 6. Which I think maybe against South Africa is needed, and it's so harsh on Coles because how good has he been? I know he's been so good.
A great athlete.
I think Guy Pepper certainly is one of the precarious names, I would say, because you're looking at Tom Curry coming back, and if he's got a big 6, then
if Curry's fit, we're going to have to find out can Curry go to the World Cup sort of thing, but he is. He is your ultimate warrior in the back row, so he's got to be there.
I think, you'd be looking, if everyone's fit and firing, you'd be looking at an England back row of Chesham, Curry, Ben Earl, wouldn't you, to take on South Africa, unless somebody comes out of the woodwork as this big barnstorming number 8. There's high hopes around Emeka Ilioni at Leicester, and there's obviously Fisselau's been in camp, didn't play the Six Nations.
It's the thing, there's a depth of talent there.
With England at the minute, it's almost a little bit like France. And I mean, they did run each other close on Saturday night. And what I said earlier, in that they bat deep in a lot of positions, but then the starting 15 isn't quite doing the business or isn't quite there. But Argentina last year proved it. As in, I don't think the England teams that played against Argentina last year, if you'd have just picked those again in the Six Nations, I don't think they'd have done any worse than the team that was actually picked in a way. And I know there's so many variables involved in that, but I think the point still stands that the depth's really good. The talent pool, and England A demolished Ireland A, and you're looking at those sort of games and you're thinking it's not all doom and gloom for England, and yet they've just had their worst Six Nations ever.
Brilliant. Well, we could go round and round. We've done our very best to keep a lid on things within an hour on this. With the Six Nations this insane, it's hard to keep it all in. So if you can, keep the conversation going. Hit us up on social media. Get into the comments of YouTube. Let us know what your teams of the championship, players of the championships were, your highlights, your lowlights, what you really enjoyed. And please keep in touch with everything that we do from Telegraph Sport from here on in. The rugby doesn't stop from this point. You know, the Six Nations was fantastic, but we roll on. Thank you very much to Gav, to Charles. Brilliant stuff, guys. Thank you also to Dan Schofield and Ollie Brown for popping in and talking to us through this Six Nations. What a show, everybody. Thanks very much.
If you're enjoying our journalism, why not sign up to From the Editor, our free email newsletter? Start your day with the latest news and opinion, plus our bite-sized puzzles. Scan the QR code to sign up free today.